Hi everybody, I hope that you had a good morning. It was nice to speak with some of you yesterday on message on the internet, and it's nice to have the new followers as well, so thank you for connecting. Today I'm going to look at part 3 of the use of English. So yesterday we did part 1, the multiple choice, and also part 2, the open close, okay? And today I'm just going to focus on part 3, where you have a text and you have one word at the end of the sentence, and it's necessary to change the form of the word. So the name of this exercise is word formation. And just to confirm that all these exercises are the advanced. So the 2 from yesterday were advanced, and the third one today is also the advanced, okay? So I'm going to share the screen and I'm going to show you the first exercise that we have. Okay, so here it is on the left, and the title is 2 sleeps per night. So you can see that there's one paragraph and the second paragraph, okay? And for example, 0, the corresponding word is despair. So despair is a substantive, so it's necessary to change the form to maybe a verb, an adjective, an adverb, maybe the negative. Okay, so there's 4 or 5 possibilities for every word. So the word families are very important, okay? So this is the article, and it's necessary to have a good feeling for the article. So I'm just going to move to the next page, and you can see that these are the key vocabulary, key expressions, all underlined like yesterday. Okay, so very similar structure from yesterday, and I will try to explain in detail each point. And maybe first on your phone, on your computer, you might want to pause and to try the exercise yourself before I give you the answers. Okay, so that's the beauty of the technology. Okay, so the title is 2 sleeps per night, and the first point is per. It's very typical in English, per, okay? So for example, I'm just going to move here, 2 times per day. It's very typical to say that, 2 times per day, 100%. Okay, so it's a basic structure, but I think the majority probably understand it already. Okay, so let's look at the first paragraph. Sometimes we wake up in the middle of the night. So we is the subject, wake is the verb, and the reason I identify this is because it's a phrasal verb, to wake up. So in this situation, up is not really so important for the significance, okay? Wake is the most important thing. You can almost eliminate up from the phrase, and it makes no difference, okay? So sometimes we wake in the middle of the night. So wake up has a very little difference from wake in this situation, okay? And try something hard to get back to sleep. Okay, so the reason I connect try and hard is because it's very, very typical. You can try very hard, you can try really hard, you can try absolutely hard, and here it's related to despair, and the correct word is desperately. Okay, so I'm just going to type that, desperately. So you try desperately hard to go back to sleep, okay? So that's just, as I said, the reason I connect try and hard, because there are other possibilities. Try very hard, try really hard, try desperately hard. So that's a bit more dramatic. And you can see the connection with despair and desperately is probably not very easy. And some people might have problems to find the correct answer. But this is the example. Number 0 always is the example, and they give you the answer for 0. Okay, so don't worry for that for the moment. So let's continue. Try desperately hard to get back to sleep. So there's no problem there. Get back to sleep is basically the same as to return to sleep. It's just a typical combination to be familiar with. It's not very dramatic. Okay, but the next one, instead, the translation is in lugar day, but instead we spend a really something night. So the verb spend here is connected with, sorry, I'm going to change that. Spend is connected with the night. Okay, so normally you can spend money, You can spend your time, you can spend your money, and in this situation, it's the night. It's also possible to spend your day. Yesterday, I spent in the past my day in the city center, and here you can spend your night, okay? So really, comfort is the word. Comfort is the substantive. The adjective would be comfortable, okay? So I'm going to write here, you have comfort at the bottom in the text. Then you probably have comfortable, okay? And then the adverb would be comfortably, but it does not really fit in this option. So we need to think a little bit more, and hopefully somebody has the answer. The correct answer is the negative, a really uncomfortable night, okay? The next verb is very advanced and it's very interesting. The verb to toss. And the best example I can give you is with a coin, money with a coin. And if you have the football match and the referee at the start to decide the end, the side, he flick or tosses a coin to decide who is the winner and then who can change the position. Okay, so to toss is very similar to tirar in Espanol, to throw. And in this situation, it's an expression, tossing and turning in your sleep is when you're very uncomfortable and you're moving and changing position all the time. That's to toss and turn, okay? That's a very famous expression. The other possibility is with a salad, and you can say to toss the salad, and that's almost like to mix or to move the salad. To toss the salad is to move it, okay? So tossing and turning until morning. The situation could be something of a stressful week. So could is the modal verb, and always after the modal verb we have the infinitive of the verb. And here it's the same, could be, could go, could like, could want, could meet. So here it's clearly a modal verb plus the infinitive after. And the green is to identify verbs, okay? So the green is related to a point in relation to a verb, and the orange is just maybe vocabulary or a different point. And the next point is stressful. So here the structure is weak is the substantive and stressful is the adjective. So A is the article. So just to repeat, I think the majority, especially at advanced level, will understand this. A stressful week. So a week is the substantive and A is the indefinite article and stressful is the adjective. Okay, so just to show you at the bottom, stress is the noun or the substantive. Stressful is the adjective. Okay, and in this situation, we have the word symptom. So again, a symptom is very similar in Spanish, and here it is the substantive, okay, the noun. And the correct word here is a little bit difficult, symptomatic. So it's a typical word in English for in relation to the doctor, and here it's symptomatic, okay? So I'm just going to show you that's the correct adjective in this situation. It's a little difficult, and it's not easy. The real answer is, the best advice is it's probably necessary to understand as much vocabulary as possible, okay? So here it's a little bit difficult, and the correct answer is symptomatic, okay? So it could be symptomatic of a stressful week, but it could be, so here is another example of the modal verb, and okay, so I'm going to show you again, sorry, it's an example of the modal verb and the infinitive verb, okay? But it could be, so could is the modal, be is the infinitive, and also is possible in this position in the middle, but it's also possible in the position at the end also. You can put also here. Or you can put also at the start. So there's no difference between the position of also. And just to remember that it is the subject. Always remember the subject in English. It could also be because of a sleep pattern. So a pattern is something that's regular, usually in clothes. If you have clothes and you have a pattern, it's like a design, something that's regular on the clothes, a pattern. In the table, you have the tablecloth and you have a pattern in the tablecloth. But for your routine, for example, Monday, you wake up at 8 o'clock. Tuesday, you wake up at 8 o'clock. Wednesday, you wake up at 8 o'clock. That's your pattern, something regular and something usual, okay? So because of a sleep pattern, we have inherited. So this is an example of the present perfect. Okay, so the subject is we, I, you, he, she, we. The auxiliary in the perfect is have. So the present perfect is always the auxiliary have. I have, you have, he has, she has. Depending on if it's a third person, you say has. But then the final part of the perfect is the participle. Okay, so we have inherited. Ed is the participle. So the verb is to inherit something you receive, maybe from your family in after time, generations. The parent gives some property or some present to the child. So that's to inherit. Okay. So the next one, research shows that that's possession, our ancestors. So just be careful with the ending, ancestors in the plural. Okay, and then we have a comma. And then rather than, again, is the same as instead of. Okay, so instead of and rather than are the same in lugar de. But always, the majority of the cases, rather than, we have the ing, the gerundio, okay? So for example, rather than going to the cinema, I decided to go to the shop, okay? Rather than watch the football, I decided to watch the swimming, okay? So rather than is very typical with the gerundio, the gerund, and this is a good example, rather than enjoying. And here we have the verb to interrupt, okay? But we have period is the substantive, and period of sleep is the substantive here. So probably we need the adjective. And the adjective for interrupt is one possibility, interrupted, okay? But here, I don't think it fits. It doesn't make sense to have interrupted. So I think it's necessary in the negative, okay? So we need to say uninterrupted. And it's necessary to understand the sense of the sentence, to get the feeling of the sentence, to recognize that it's in the negative, uninterrupted, okay? So rather than enjoying an uninterrupted period of sleep at night, had two sleeps broken up by some time awake. So again, broken up is a phrasal verb, and there's no real big difference between broken and broken up. They're very, very possible in this situation. Break up is a phrasal verb, and it's very typical in the movies, in the series, in relationships. If you break a relationship, yes, it's possible break, but it's very typical break up. And there's no real importance with up. It's just the emphasis that everything is broken. So you broken up, and in this situation, it's sleep. So it's possible a relationship, but it's possible sleep as well. So broken up some sleep by some time awake. Okay, and again here, awake is the adjective in this case. So there is a verb to wake, but here we need to say awake is an adjective in this case. Okay, so that's the first paragraph. I think number 17 is okay. It's not too difficult. Number 18 is a little tricky, but maybe in Spanish it's similar. And number 19, I think, is not too difficult as well. If you remember yesterday, I think exercise 2 was quite hard. So this one looks a little easier, which is good, but you just need to be very careful with the spelling and the detail of every letter. Okay, so let's look at the second paragraph, and you can see the first part is one word. So the 8 hours a night pattern, and this line I'm going to show you, we call it in English a hyphen. Okay, so the spelling of a hyphen you can see here. And when you have the hyphen, you can create one word. So here, 8 hours a night is one adjective in this situation. So the is the definite article, 8 hours a night is one adjective, and pattern is the substantive. Okay, and then you have the relative pronoun that. So that replaces the subject of the pattern. Has become, the green is for the verb. So again, this is an example of the present perfect. So the verb is to become, become, became, become, okay? And has is the auxiliary of the verb to have. Okay, so the pattern has, become, almost, and then essence is the substantive. The essence is the substantive, but it doesn't work in, we need to change from substantive maybe to verb or maybe to adjective. And I think the majority of people should be able to find the correct one here. And I think we can say essential. So probably essential. It has become an essential, almost essential to modern humans, has only been, okay, so number 21 is definitely the most difficult. Okay, so number 21, you can see here, the full sentence, has become almost essential to modern humans, has only been custom. So custom is no problem to understand, because I think it's very similar in Spanish. But just to be careful, I'm going to write in the text here the difference between a custom and a costume. So be very careful with the difference between a custom and a costume. Okay, so a custom has two significances. The first significance is in commerce, and you send the product to a different country and you have to pay a custom. So you have to pay an extra fee or an extra price when you send a product. So in trade, in business, in commerce, a custom is like a tax. Okay. And the second significance is related to the answer. The second significance is something that you do traditionally. So for example, in Ireland, on St. Patrick's Day, it is a custom to have the parade, like the cabalgata in Spanish. For Los Reyes Magos, you have the cabalgata. It's a custom. It's something that you do every year. It's like a tradition. Okay, so a synonym for a custom is probably a tradition. And that's the answer, that's the clue for the answer for number 21. And really, the answer is difficult, and they say customary, okay? So it's like traditional or something regular, something normal. So only being customary, like tradition, as I said, in industrialized countries since the 19th century. Okay, before I look at since, I just want to remind you of the difference with a costume. So a costume is at Halloween, typically at Halloween, when you dress, you change the clothes and you look like a ghost, or you look like a clown, or you look, so in English we say to dress up. There's a phrasal verb to dress up. And here, a costume is the difference, okay? So a custom and a costume are very, very different. Okay, so the second point in relation to since, the difference between since and from. So since is one particular moment. So I am awake since 8 o'clock this morning. It's one particular moment, okay? And from, we usually have 2 points. So I had my breakfast this morning from 8:30 until 9 o'clock. So from, until, or from, unto, but since is just one moment, okay? And it's very typical with the present perfect. For example, I is the subject. I have been, present perfect. I have been in Ireland since January. Okay, so it's one moment in the past and it's extending, it continues to the present. And that's the reason for the present perfect, typical with since. Okay, so here it's one moment, it's the 19th century. So yes, it's a long, long time, but really it's just one moment in history since the 19th century. Okay. Then is like entonces, no problem. Electricity is the substantive, and here's the subject of the sentence, no problem also. Afford is the verb, and it's related to money. So if you can afford a holiday, that means you have the ability to pay for the holiday. Okay, so afford is related to ability to pay. Okay, and the adjective is affordable. So I'm just going to write here affordable. Adjective. Okay, unaffordable is the negative adjective. Okay, and Yeah, so here, I think it should be okay. So in this context of the sentence, the answer is affordable. So people have the ability to pay for the money, okay? So affordable electricity was introduced. And the reason I identify was introduced because this is an example of the passive, okay? And typical in part 4 of the use of English with the sentences that are very tricky and very difficult, the active and the passive are very typical in part 4. And this is an example of the active and the passive. So remember, the active is the subject, the verb, and the object. For example, I introduce my friend to another person. But the passive, we change the position, the other person and I. Okay, so my friend plus the auxiliary to be was, in the past, participle introduced by me. Okay, so I, active, I introduced my friend to another person. And then the passive, my friend, auxiliary to be, was, participle introduced by me to another friend. Okay, so here's an example again, was introduced. It doesn't say by who. It's not necessary here to say by who. It just says in general it was introduced. Which again is the relative pronoun. So that's related to electricity or the introduction maybe. Okay. Resulted in. Okay, this is very typical, to result in. And that's the reason I identified. So you can see in the text, I'm going to type to result in. Okay, so for example, the bad weather resulted in no party. So it's the consequence, very typical for consequence. The bad weather resulted in no party. Okay, and here it's the same, which resulted in, okay, so resulted in a division between night and day. Then again, we have the relative pronoun. So that is probably the division, represents the division. Became is the past simple. So remember, become, became, become. So in this situation, it's the past simple. Became. Progress is the substantive. You have their progress, and also it's a verb to progress. But in this situation, we have an adjective, blurred, okay? And it's very, very good vocabulary. So I'm going to show you here in the text. So there is a verb to blur, and it's related to the television. When the television, the quality of the image, remember yesterday, imagen in Espanol, but in English, the image of the television, the quality is very bad. In English, we say it's very blurry, okay? So for example, if you have a bad memory and you say, oh, last weekend was a blur, I cannot remember anything. And in Spanish, I'm going to show you the translation for blur. So it is a verb and it is a substantive. And here, blur in Spanish is nublarse. Similar in English to cloud, cloudy, okay? So blurry and blurred, I think, are two adjectives that are very possible as well. And here it is an adjective, okay? So the division basically is the subject. The division became very blurred, okay? So it was not very clear, very cloudy, the division. All right, and then progress is related to the adjective. So I think adjective, no. I think here we need something connected to the verb. So probably an adverb. And remember, adverb in Spanish is like mente, lentamente. And here, I think we need to say the same, progressively. And remember, in English, the adverb, the suffix, typical is ly. So progressively is typically the adverb, okay? So the answer, I think, is progressively for number 23. Okay, and then the next sentence, what had, and this is a good example also of the past perfect. So had is the auxiliary in the perfect, so it's the past. Remember here, this is the perfect also. So has become is the present perfect, because has is the present. But in this situation, had is the past, so it's the past perfect. and the verb to be in the participle, been. And then it's confusing because until then is in the middle of the position, and it's no problem, the position. You can have it in the middle, it's possible at the start, it's possible at the end. Okay, so until then can be here, and until then can be here if you want. Very similar to the previous example we had with also earlier in the text. Okay, so what had until then been daytime, so that's the adjective. Activity is the substantive, so it's the activity that's possible durante, during the day. Okay, and here's another example of the modal plus the infinitive. So modal plus infinitive could now be, and the position of now, no problem. It's possible at the start and it's possible at the end if you want. Be enjoyed after darkness. So you have two contrasts. You have daytime and you have darkness. Okay, and you have the suffix ness, ness. So dark is the adjective, darkness is the substantive, and daytime is the contrast. Okay, as a result, that's a very good linker. In English, in the exams, they say cohesive device. So it's a word that makes the comments very fluid. Okay, so this is a good example. As a result, as a consequence, therefore, like por lo tanto, I think is very similar, por lo tanto in Espanol. Here's another example, however, which is a contrast, that's sin embargo. Okay, as a result, we is the subject, went is the verb in the past, to go, went, and usually with go to Italy, go to Rome. In the past, went to bed later. No problem. The next sentence, the subject is we, and I think that's no problem. And the verb is to be. In the past, we were, therefore, again, por lo tanto, as a result, it's like a synonym, more tired. And that's important because the adjective is tired, and in this situation, it's not, the incorrect is tireder. That's incorrect. So it's necessary to say more tired. And sometimes it's irregular, the rule, normally in relation to syllable. With one syllable, you just add er. Okay, normally, but sometimes there's exceptions, and more than one syllable, you can add IER with the Y, for example, hungry, hungrier. But here, just remember, the adjective is tired, and the extra más in Espanol, more tired. Okay, and this something us, so it's the object, us. Okay, and the word we need for 24 is related to able. And this is very common in the Cambridge exams. This word able is very flexible and it's very common in the Cambridge exams. And for 24, we need something special. And I hope some people have the correct answer. And it's quite important and it's a bit difficult. Okay, so first, before, we need to understand the sentence. The verb to sleep, dormir, no problem. But the preposition through, so this is a phrasal verb. Through is a través, and in English it's the same really. To sleep, dormir, a través el noche. So totally, completely. To sleep completely, a través el noche. Okay, so to sleep through the night. And here, able is the adjective, I am able. The adverb is ably, A-B-L-Y. So I'm just going to write the list here. So able is the adjective. Okay, and then the negative is unable, also adjective. The substantive is the ability. Okay, so that's the noun, the substantive ability. It's possible also the negative disability is a noun also. Okay, but the verb, I think here we really need the verb for number 24. We need the correct form of the verb. And there is a verb in English, to enable. And that's fundamental. It's very crucial. And in the exams in Cambridge, this form of able is very, very important and it's quite common. So here, this enable, so it's the plural also. So we need enabled. In the present, enables, but probably in the past, enabled. Okay, so I think the answer should be enabled. 24, enabled us to sleep through the night. However, sin embargo, scientists, this is also a typical issue because science is the subject, scientist is the person, and then scientists is the person or the people in plural. And that's very, very important. This word in particular for Spanish speakers is very, very interesting and important. And if you look at the writing, so a scientist is the person. The adjective is scientific. Okay, that's the adjective, it's scientific. And science is the substantive or the noun or the subject in English, asignatura in Espanol, science. So this is common, and many, many times we see this word probably badly translated from Spanish. So in this situation, it's the people, the professional people in the plural. Scientists believe that subconsciously, some people may still follow. And here's another example of the modal verb. May is a possibility. It's probably more polite. It's not definite, it's a possibility. So some people may, plus the infinitive, follow, seguir, and still is in the middle, and no problem with the position. Still is possible here, and still is possible here. And the translation for still is todavía. And it's also very important, the difference in English between still and yet. But here, it's todavía, okay? So they may still follow the old patterns. So remember, we had pattern at the top. But in this case, it's the plural. So be very careful always with the plural and the detail. And have a lengthy period. So that's the article, indefinite article. The substantive is the period, the noun or the substantive. And lengthy here is the adjective. But you maybe recognize length. Okay, the length is the key word that we need. And the adjective is lengthy. Okay, so length is the noun. And then it is possible lengthy. Adjective. And I'll give you an example of the holidays. So after working all year, you need a lengthy holiday. So it's like a long holiday. You need a very, very long holiday, a lengthy holiday. And that's the adjective here. It's not very typical, but no problem because they give you the word. So old patterns and have a lengthy period of wakefulness during the night. And again, wakeful is definitely not so common, very unusual word, but it's related to wake when we saw above awake and to wake. So it's related to wake. Full, for example, successful, and it's a suffix. So there's two suffixes here, and then ness, so fullness. So it's a substantive, wakefulness. So that's probably the most unusual word in the text. And it's interesting, but it's not so common, so don't worry. But also it's not related to the questions in this exercise, so that's the key point. Okay, so that's an example of the exercise from part 3. As I said, it's the advanced exam, and I think, yeah, it's from an advanced book. So yesterday we did part 1, multiple choice. It was from the advanced. Also part 2, the open close, from the advanced, which was a little difficult. And today, part 3 with the word formation. It's necessary to change maybe from verb to adjective to noun to adverb, negative. There's a few possibilities. Some people prefer this exercise. Some people prefer part 1. So everybody has a different preference. I think in my opinion, part 3 is probably more comfortable, a little easier, but you need to be careful with the detail, with the spelling, with the plural, with the negative. The little detail is so important in this part 3. And that's a good example of a part 3. So later I will do part 4, which is the sentences, and which is the sentence exercise where you need to change the form of the sentence, which is very difficult. So I will prepare a video this week for part 4, and I will try to continue every part of the exam. So we have part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4 of use of English. Next, we will do reading, part 5, part 6, part 7 in the first certificate, part 8 in the advanced. Also, we have the writing, which you have two parts in the writing. We have the listening, you have 4 parts. You have the speaking, where you have 4 parts, okay? So little by little, I will try to prepare some videos and try to help a little. And for the moment, I'm happy to do it because it's a good opportunity for me to produce more material and to make contact with other people. And thank you again for the new followers and for the like. Thank you for liking the video because it shares it with other people. And yeah, good. So have a nice day. And before I go, I just want to show you a little picture of Dublin this morning. So here you can see Dublin. So this first picture was maybe 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock this morning. This first picture, very blue sky, but very, very cold, okay? And then later at maybe 2 o'clock, the clouds started to appear and it became a little more, a little colder again, okay? So there's just 2 examples of Dublin this morning. Yesterday it was raining all day, and that's the typical weather in Dublin. So enjoy your afternoon, and thank you again, and we'll keep in touch. And if you have any comments or questions about the material, you can put the question in the Facebook post, and I should be able to see it then. All right, thank you, and bye bye.